it used to be that if you had a Twitter account, you were relatively anonymous, right? You don't have to actually sign up with your real name. You've got, an email address that could potentially be anonymous. You didn't used to have to actually give your phone number to create that. Of course, they probably could track your IP in some particular way. But you could be pretty damn anonymous on Twitter, and Twitter kept that user data pretty private as far as we ever knew. Doesn't seem to be so private anymore, though, based upon what Munch is saying that they're doing with allowing people from the Indian government into their data centers and allowing China to do some interesting stuff with some of their advertising feature functionality to do custom audiences. So I'm a little worried with that.
Well, and here again it starts like 2 steps before that, right? So the first step is don't ever create the data to begin with, but then if you create this, like he said, in his estimation, every engineer has basically access to all customer data. Half of the company. So I forgot what the number of employees is, but let's say it's 10,000 employees and 5,000 have complete access to this data. So what are the chances that these 5,000 people have friends that might at some point in time be interested in getting certain information from that, right? That's basically 100%, right?
And you don't have to have too many bad apples in there.
No.
With issues, right?
It's simple statistics at that point in time, right? So you give too many people access, and you get it's the typical saying: with great power comes great responsibility, right? And so they have enormous power by just surveilling everybody, and then abusing that ability by simply creating the data in the first place and then making it available, not necessarily even to third parties, but to their internal employees, and not even knowing if, when, where this data is being accessed, like Much said. That to me is grounds to just shut down the company until they fix that. So if I had the power, if I was, let's say, the Attorney General, and I heard that, and specifically based on the fact that there was already an FTC consent decree in place, I would just tell them, okay, shut down operations. You can open it up again once the security risks are no longer in existence, because apparently fines don't do the trick, right? So they tried that. At some point in time, you feel like a fly. Well, you try to fine them, and that didn't increase behavior. So change the penalty. And there's only one in my mind that's justified at this point. Shut it down until morale improves.
Yeah. I don't know whether, well, the FTC probably has the power to do that, though they would have to do some court maneuvering to make that happen. But one thing that people don't realize is that the GDPR enforcement powers actually do have that ability. They have the ability to walk into any office and essentially take any documents and pretty much do whatever the hell they want to enforce GDPR privacy law, and including shutting down companies, I believe. I'm not a lawyer. I'm obviously a privacy expert. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that they can actually probably stop businesses even more readily than the FTC might be able to. They haven't ever done that, but I think that they can.
Maybe Heidi knows that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe somebody else could weigh in there, but I'm pretty sure that I know that they could just walk into any offices whenever they want and take documents.
Yeah.
I know they've got that kind of power. I imagine they could probably shut you down in the same way.
Yeah, so Vikram wanted to talk about stalkerware, so let me know when you're ready to do that. That's a topic I'm super interested in, obviously. Hey, Vikram.
Greetings, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the opportunity. I just wanted to comment, and especially given the way this show started today, it is a topic close to my heart. in terms of being able to provide methodologies for detection. And it's something that we are actively working on in my company. And I will commit as a CEO of a company that I will, for public good, give out an instance of my software if it can help in the cause for it to run, and we will host it, we will run it in the cloud so that we can offer a free mechanism for which people can access and determine if they have access to stalkerware.
Oh yeah, that's excellent. I can connect you with the NGOs that we are supporting because that's exactly what they need.
Yeah, and whatever we need to do to enable the public-private partnerships around that, happy to work on that. And the second point I wanted to comment on is something that Kimberly mentioned is, and you mentioned, Jeff, is I think if we try to address the privacy problem of go turn off this setting on Facebook, go turn off this setting on your browser, go reset your ad ID, I think it gets complex very quick and very hard to explain. And to Kimberly's point about empowering a mother, I think if we enable the argument as in let people make the informed choices, right? How about if we can give people true insights on where you've lost what data, right? Who has access to your geolocation? If I can give you a comprehensive list of that, I think that enables people to make the informed choice on what they want to use. And maybe the informed choice is the least technical, right? They may just say, okay, I'm scared of this thing now, maybe I just delete this app, right? And it's game over, right? So I think there's a very crucial point in that empowerment and how we enable that empowerment.
Yeah, and it has to be user-friendly, right? That's the problem, right? So if you have, people usually have dozens of apps on their phone, they forget that they installed something, they might have installed some software on their computer or not updated their computer, they have cookies, and they accumulate all these risks over time, and there's no like easy button. There's no like button that you can push that would just turn off information sharing wholesale until you reactivate that, which is kind of absurd in a way, that we have to go through these troubles in order to make that possible, because that should be default, not the other way around, right? So my standard is kind of always the same. If the government was going to do something like that, or a government agency, then that agency and that agent would need a court order and a warrant to do that. And for what reason is it justified that commercial interest can just do this milli-vanilli, is just check a box that you agree to something that you never read, and that removes the entire need of ever needing a warrant, right? So, and there specifically, and then I stop my little rant as usual, but there specifically, if you think about that, that entirely circumvents our rule of law, because in that government scenario where the government agents would need a warrant, well, now he can just rely on the fact that whoever he or she wants information about is already being surveilled by default, and they can just later on subpoena that, whereas if they were trying to do that before, a court would have probably denied that, right? Yeah. And then they go back.
It's not just the government, Chris.
Right.
The copies of data that get made, upon that supposed consent, it's just crazy, right? I mean, if you look at the 𝗙cie𝗂𝗶𝗃 case that the FTC is prosecuting now, 𝗙cie𝗂𝗶𝗃 is a data broker that claims that they've got legal consent for all of this location data, for instance, that they track. But I would bet that 90% of the people that they have this location data on would say, wait a second, how did you get my location data? I didn't consent to that. And if I did, I didn't realize that I consented to it, and I didn't know it was going to go to you. And if I did, I want to take that consent back now. But there's no easy way to take that consent back. There's probably no way at all, let alone an easy way. So how do we handle that situation? We apparently can't. And there's no easy way for anybody to actually know that 𝗙cie𝗂𝗶𝗃 has their data, because they're first of all shadowy, and second of all, the only reason anybody knows about it is because of this lawsuit, right?
Yeah, I keep hearing this ad about this company, 𝗃𝗄𝗃. Have you heard about that one? Like data?
Melissa Data?
Yeah.
Oh, they've been around for a long, long time.
So that bothers me, like just the way they are advertising. It says we are the address experts. It's like, okay, that's not a good thing.
Well, it's really interesting.
Gentlemen, we went from, okay, and this is going to age me because my kid doesn't know what one is anymore, is a phone book. Right. Where you could look up the address of somebody and you had their phone number and you could go to their house and stuff. To today, you can actually know or find out with not much of an issue. I go to Starbucks every morning at 8 o'clock. I get the same order. I get, and then I leave and I go to the bank and make a deposit for my work. So if I were wanting to rob my business or my person, I know exactly what I'm going to be wearing. And that's much more invasive and along the lines of what we're talking about. And we do that because, yes, I want to put my order in at Starbucks so it's ready when I get there. I have on my calendar that, I got to go to the bank every day at this time, so I've got it blocked off. My traffic map is set to where it's going to go to that. I've got a preset route every day. I go the same route. And, so people get in a habit because it's comfortable, because it's normal to them. And they don't think about what that means to somebody that's looking at them or wants to do something to them, just like with the stalker and such. We see so many instances of predatory casing of individuals, young girls, children, everything, that we have to get people out of that comfort zone to where they're thinking about it. Again, coming back to that notification of what data is being gathered and how do we do that effectively, that people aren't just, oh yeah, click past it, I'm done, because I want to get my Starbucks order in, or I want to get my coffee order in at my local coffee shop, and then I need to go to the bank, and then I'm going to go over here. And later I'm going to go pick up my groceries from the store because I put my order in, and somebody who can get into that app knows that every week I buy, several things of beer, and I have this and I have that, and yet the companies that I'm working with, the coffee company is going to send me offers for more coffee. The traffic map is going to say, well, what about this place that's just off the route to go try out for lunch? And then my grocery store is going to say, well, hey, we've got deals on this and this and this because of your past purchasing thing. We love convenience. I'll be the first to admit it. I love my convenience. But if I were not a privacy professional, would I have any clue of all of this? Yes, there's lots of noise on the news and stuff, but to most people, it's news. It's, oh, that wouldn't happen to me. That wouldn't happen to me. And so we need to engage more in awareness.
Let's talk about that a little bit further, though. Even if we were completely aware and if we fixed all of our privacy settings, unless we stop doing stuff in the modern world, if we stop making credit card purchases, if we stop driving our car around with license plates, government organizations and even some private organizations can still track us. Automatic license plate readers are getting really invasive all over the place. The financial data that flows around about us through data brokers, financial data brokers, is getting pretty horrifying. If you're buying stuff, that those transactions, medical transactions, financial transactions, go pretty much everywhere, I would be pretty concerned. The UN report on privacy and human rights actually has sort of 3 different bullet points they sort of focus on. One is abuse and intrusive hacking tools like spyware, the Pegasus stuff, right? The second is talking about how we need sort of robust encryption stuff to protect us. And the third is for genomics, which is, you know,
Jeff, I think your internet connection is a little low. You are frozen, so I'm gonna take over here. I posted a link to that report. It's only 17 pages into the chat window on Zoom. I will post it on the LinkedIn thread as well. It's an interesting read. It probably doesn't actually go far enough, probably in terms of identifying these threats. Like from a technology perspective, I think the people that aggregated this are not really clued into the latest technologies by and large. Jeff, you're back. Oh, we got Jeff frozen. Okay. All right, but yeah, makes for an interesting read regardless. Vikram.
So I had a point again, based on what Jeff and Kimberly were just talking about, right? It's with respect to these kinds of usage of these services. Me too. I love my convenience. I don't want to stop using these apps and services and devices as well, right? But let's think about it this way. Back when we didn't have these, or back when the dangers that we faced were very different, back in the 70s and 80s and etc. We had a set of hygiene requirements, safety hygiene requirements, right? So we like when you're going to school, don't talk to a stranger. If a stranger tells you to come with them, don't go with them, right? So what are those, how can we think about what are those kind of safety prerogatives? It's not just, people are sick and tired of hearing, change your password, and or only go to swipe your credit card and I trust. They've all heard this a million times over. But then are there a set of safety prerogatives of how can I digitally guide somebody to watch your back when you're on the internet highway, right? And how do you, what are those sets of instructions that we can get to people in a very simple, digestible fashion? And I think there's a lot of thought process that everybody needs to put into to make that simple and understandable.
Yeah, as the human rights reports go specifically into that Pegasus software case, which is just outrageous. If you haven't heard about that, there's a company that was selling. I don't know if I hope they are shut down. I don't remember, Jeff. Are they still active? Do you know? But they were selling spy software that would circumvent iOS and Android without much effort, essentially. And this company was actively selling this to hostile governments for them to crack down on dissidents and otherwise unwanted parties. It's just outrageous as an Israeli cyber company. That just boggles the mind that these entities can exist. But then again, I think of Google and Facebook in that same category, right? I don't think they're much different in that sense. You can readily use those tools to start surveilling people. I think we lost Jeff entirely. His machine probably crashed. He mentioned earlier his problems with that. But yeah, so Vikram, you said you guys are working on a one push button that can make it so that you are no longer sharing certain information.
I mean, it's more around the informed choice, right? So
Okay.
I want to promote my company in this. It's about, I want to be able to understand what information I reveal to who, number one, and then be able to make choices around that. And maybe I want to block access to those applications entirely, or even delete them. Maybe that's a choice. Maybe not use our product and just plain delete them.
Mm-hmm.
Or the third choice might be, well, I got to use it. I have no option. My school requires me. My workplace requires me. Or I just need it for my daily life, but I shall at least block off access to every other party other than that specific company as well, alone, right? So how do we start to give people those insights to make those informed choices and then allow them to make that kind of choice? So that's where we're taking it. So second piece to that is also identifying what is necessary. The subtext to what I just said is, for every app device and service, what is necessary for it, for the functioning of that app device or service,
Right.
and what is not, whether it's malicious or privacy violating or otherwise. Building knowledge around what that is really what we are focusing on.
Okay. So what do you tell people who like look at the iPhone, then they see, oh, there's VPN already set up. I mean, as of late, Apple has been positioning themselves as we are the privacy advocate, we are the people that provide you with free VPN service, we're going to cut off location services, sharing between apps. Is that mostly window dressing and virtual signaling, or how effective is that really from your experience?
So fundamentally, as much as we like to not trust the bigger companies here, I will actually give kudos to Apple on this for one big reason. Given their footprint, they've raised the awareness of some of these privacy issues more than any of us could have fundamentally done by ourselves, right? So there's a heightened level of awareness, and they've brought it into some simple features, right? Now, one thing I will say is that yes, it's window dressing because at the end of the day, you're still allowing a mechanism to enable the access, and then once access is enabled, it's kind of there forever. Now, how do you also let the customer know that on the next app update or any other kind of update that it doesn't get turned on by default, or this same company is not acquiring that data from a different source, right? So if you have one scenario is there are app vendors who make multiple different apps. So I can collect geolocation on one and say I'm not collecting anything else on that app. I can collect email on another, etc., and then cross match. And now next thing I know, I have 10 pieces of data about you.
Mm-hmm.
So how does it prevent that? Number one. The second thing about the private relay and the VPN is, I think we as a privacy industry need to do a better job of enunciating the fact that VPN is not a privacy solution, because the VPN owner knows everything about you, right? And a lot of people seem to say, is that a VPN? I use a VPN, I must be safe. We got to start saying,
Yeah.
no, you're not. And not to mention that there are a lot of very malicious VPN vendors out there as well, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's two pieces to this. There is a definite positive in that the awareness level has gone up, and the negative is that it's sending a false level of security as well. And I think now the focus has to be on giving people enough insight that they can make the informed choices for themselves.
Welcome back, Jeff. And you're mute.
Yeah, sorry, I agree with you on the VPNs not necessarily being a perfect solution. I actually saw something that I really liked maybe about a year ago, and I don't think that solution works anymore, but a security professional had figured out a way to do sort of daisy chain VPNs such that you sort of had two going, and one of those VPNs would know who you are, and the other VPN would know where you were going, but they wouldn't know the two pieces together, right? Which is maybe a better solution. But if you only have one VPN, they know who you are and they know where you're going. So, and that's maybe not exactly the solution people are looking for.
Yeah, as a side note, so actually this month for the first time in the United States, iOS on smartphones has exceeded 50% of the smartphone market in the United States. Worldwide, it's obviously a very different picture still, with most people just being limited to Android devices, if that's a fair description. And like when we evaluate solutions for these markets, that's one of our requirements, whether or not this particular app, for example, can work on really simple devices that are not as sophisticated as the latest iPhone device, because by and large what's being marketed on a day-to-day basis are these very heavy apps that people find on the top of the App Store markets, but the reality on the ground is somewhat different. As in, we did analysis of the African markets for different payment solutions, and there a lot of people cannot even download these apps, right? So they're too big for their smartphones. They take up too much space on their smartphone. So this goes to the point of, you got to have a certain audience in mind. You have to actually be able to cater what I call the lowest common denominator, and that should always be the most like unfortunate in society. So it should work for them, right, as a starting point, and then you can build on that. But in my mind, we should invalidate everything else, right? So if a dissident in the Middle East with a really cheap smartphone that he or she bought for $20 for cash somewhere on the counter cannot use your particular solution, then actually probably no one should be using it.
You know, the issue we have, Chris, is that it doesn't help to be private if you're unable to communicate with anybody, right?
Yes.
If you're a dissident, if you're an activist, if you're somebody that wants to change the world or change your situation or something, right? Being private is only half the solution, right? You still have to be able to communicate with people. So otherwise, you know, what's the point? What's the point of living, right? You need to be able to live a life. You need to be able to communicate your ideas. You need to be able to communicate with other people, or else what's the effing point?
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at Silent Phone yesterday, which is a secure communication platform that will work on Android and iPhone. But immediately doing the sign up, I mean, it's a $10 a month solution, so that's already out of reach for a lot of people that I have in mind at that point in time, because $10 for a lot of people around the world is more than they make in a week. But the other point there was, it was very apparent that you had to invite people to that in order for it to actually be secure. So yeah, other people also had then to join that network, had to download that application for you to have to end-to-end encryption using that network. And so unfortunately, all of these solutions are based on network effects, and there we just have a lot of capture, and a lot of capture by really malicious entities at this point in time that really don't put their quote-unquote user interest at the forefront, because they just optimizing for shareholder value at the end of the day, and you can't really fault them for that, albeit I would fault them for simply the fact that they don't even measure the externalities that they're creating by promoting certain services in a particular way. So that should be the minimum requirement, right? So like measure for the externalities. If you're driving a car that's polluting the environment, or producing a car that's polluting the environment, you have to do that. If you're creating an application that pollutes basically this digital, what I call the digital landfill, that people think is the World Wide Web, then we should at least, at a minimum, require that this is being measured. Like, and in real time. Tell me in real time, how much time of people did you waste today? Or how many people had negative consequences based on interacting with your particular digital solution? Doesn't matter if that's Facebook or yet another app for your cell phone that just happens to be on top of the App Store because you spend $10 million in marketing and pushing it in front of the right eyeballs to turn them into a little lab rat, stimulating their lizard brains.
The language around the conversation around those sort of terms have changed a little bit. It seems that people used to talk a lot about the attention economy and the user-generated content economy, right? And they don't really call it that anymore, do they, Chris?
I don't know. I shared this book with you yesterday. I didn't get around to read it yet, but I'll put it into the show notes because, yeah, anecdotally, that's where this particular book is going. But to me, it's never been about that. It's really more about being able to influence the behavior of people. I don't know if that's necessarily attention, because attention is kind of top of the funnel. If I get all of your attention because of some accident, right? So the typical example is you drive on a freeway and freeways on the other, the traffic on the other side is slowing down. Why? Because there's an accident on the other side and people like to watch that for whatever bizarre reason. And that's kind of the same principle that you see online in essence, right? So there's like an accident, some headline saying, oh, you won't believe what happened to 𝗙𝗍𝗶𝗃𝗁 today. It's a disaster. Check it out here, right? People, for some reason, are attracted to that. But again, that's just like the attention grabber and top of the funnel. The more malicious thing is usually happening afterwards. So now I have your attention, and now I want to mold your behavior into an action that's beneficial to me, whoever me is, right? So me could be a quote-unquote advertiser that wants to sell me something useless, and because I now have his or her attention, I'm engaged with that. But obviously these things are non-directional, and what I mean by that, and that's really the worst thing in my mind, really. Usually when you get to engage with technology, you set the direction. I've used this example many times, so sorry if I'm boring anybody, but to me it's the same thing as if my electric car decided that once I sit down, it takes me a certain route to a certain destination, right? And not me setting the route or the destination. It just makes no sense. To me, that also makes no sense when I engage with digital technology. That should be the first question that the technology is pushing in front of me. Where do you want to go? How do you want to go there? Right? And that this is even a business model, that you can sell social engineering as a service. And that should be so obvious now, right? So that's why when I listen to these congressional hearings, as far evolved as they have gotten, they get still away with like claiming we sell advertising. But that's not what they do. That's not what they have ever done, right? That's like observably not what's happening. They're selling social engineering as a service to the highest bidder. It's not advertising. So that we allow this as a business model seems, to this day, has been, once I came to this realization like 14 years ago, it seemed utterly absurd, and I was looking for people who would point that out, and start doing something in both a civil and a criminal procedural way. And that's still not happening. And not only that, but we're not even calling it on a regular basis what it is. They should not be allowed to call it advertising as a starting point. Just call it what it is.
It's not just the ads that people put out there, right? It's the fact that you can direct conversations in certain ways and create groups, and push people's attitudes and ideas in certain ways, right? Through these platforms.
Yeah, or just the mood or the opinion on certain topics. It doesn't matter to them, right? It's entirely irrelevant. It's psyops, essentially. It's individualized psyops. Yeah, and we are the lucky ones, right? So in countries that still proclaim to uphold the rule of law, we are still the lucky ones. If you're living under some authoritarian government, as most people do, you're not so lucky, right? So if Google, Facebook, Twitter is allowed to operate there and kind of adheres to their laws, which I always put this in quotes because what people usually refer to is not laws, when they don't call this laws. Those are the local rules.
Yeah.
Right? So that's very different. So but, that's another point that American companies specifically shouldn't get away with that excuse, well, we're following the local laws. Well, it doesn't really matter, right? If these local rules, local laws violate just basic human rights, like freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of movement, and other things, then you should be required to ignore that or not operate there, period. Well, not operate there, I'll take that part back, because you should operate there, but be aware that if you are operating there, you cannot just like apply those local rules because they exist. That's not a good enough excuse.
Yeah. Chris, before we end up here, I want to plug Bob Sullivan's podcast. There's a podcast called 𝗙će𝗂𝗶𝗶𝗃𝗰𝘆, which sounds sort of like a strange name for a podcast. It's actually a podcast that's not active at the moment, though Bob told me a few months back that it may actually come back alive at some point. But Bob Sullivan is sort of a researcher, and he does some work around the privacy arena. And the 𝗙će𝗂𝗶𝗃𝗃 podcast actually has sort of a series inside of it called 𝗙𝗡𝗏, which is a really interesting series that talks about data brokers and stalking. And he does this series with a co-host, and it's really well produced and really interesting for any privacy professional to check it out. I really loved it when I listened to it, and I think it really brings home some of these fears of being profiled to death. So if you like the story about YBYR that we started this episode with, you really want to listen to the No Place to Hide episode, because it talks about exactly that kind of privacy threat.
Yeah, and I put the link to the How to Destroy the Attention Economy.
Oh, good.
Into the
That's
show notes.
From 𝗙će𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗁. Right?
Yes, I'm going to check into that over the weekend if I can. But I think that's also worth listening to.
Yeah, I have not checked that out yet, but that looks like an awesome series. So I would recommend it even without having read it, because 𝗙će𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗁 has some awesome content.
Yeah,
he's a wonderful writer.
Yeah. All right, folks, we're at the top of the hour. Again, today we didn't have a necessary scheduled panelist. We're trying to batch this better and also finish our playing around with technology things to make things more pleasant for everybody to watch and not for people and pictures and sounds to disappear all the time. Ethan was nice enough to text me saying, hey, you don't have sound on YouTube. So whoever was trying to watch it on YouTube in the beginning, there was no sound. In the beginning, we will upload the local recording as we have to, probably every couple weeks. But we'll keep doing that until we get it right. We're committed to that. If you want to support us, just dial in again next week, or send us show ideas or people that we should have on, topics we should have on. And Jeff, I think we should, do we have this public, the future topics Google Sheet?
Yeah, that spreadsheet's public.
Okay, so yeah, but we should promote this a little more, and then maybe start inviting people to our production meeting. So we actually have a weekly production meeting, believe it or not. This is not entirely spur of the moment, and typically we talk for 2-3 hours to make this Friday show happen. And yeah, we want to make it most useful for everybody and not just vent ultimately, but produce solutions that are actionable and that can make a difference to people's lives who are way more affected than we are. All right, with that said, do you want to lead us out, Jeff?
Yeah, well, we want to thank the people that came up Vikram and also Kimberly for joining the podcast and episode this week. And we don't know what the episode is going to be next week, but look for something over the weekend where we'll publish that. And we hope you'll join us next week for episode 32 of Your Rights, Your Rights.